Hello, everyone. This is our case brief for the case Palsgraf vs. Long Island Railroad Company.
So just to give a quick background about the facts in this case, 40-year-old Helen Palsgraf and her two daughters were waiting for the train to head to Rockaway Beach. Now, while they were on the platform, a train pulled into the station that wasn't theirs. After the passengers boarded the train, it slowly began to move away from the station, and meanwhile, back in the 1920s, there weren't doors on the trains or anything like that. So as the train was slowly moving away from the station, two men on the platform started to run towards the train, and one of the men successfully entered the moving train without any complications or getting injured or anything. But the other man was running with the package, and he got pushed onto the train by one of the platform guards. So kind of like a police officer or something like that. And due to getting pushed onto the train while it was moving, the package that he was holding got dislodged from his hand and was left onto the platform. And what was unknown was that in the package consisted fireworks, which ended up exploding on the platform, injuring multiple people, including Palsgraf. So, yeah. So here we're going to be looking at some of the procedural history of the case, which is tied to the legal actions that were taken in the court system. Palsgraf brought the suit against the railroad, which was heard in the Supreme Court of New York on October 2nd, 1924. And then not long after the incident, so only 1 month later, the summons were served to both parties. And a month after that, on December 3rd, the defendant filed its answer. The case was heard 3 years later on May 24th and May 25th of 1927. So the ruling was that Palsgraf won in that court, but LIRR, the Long Island Railroad, filed for appeal for the case to be heard by the New York Court of Appeals, which is the highest state court in the state of New York. And that was argued February 24th, 1928, and decided May 29th, 1928.
Here we will discuss the issues that surrounded the case of Palsgraf vs. Long Island Railroad Company. The court had to decide whether the Long Island Railroad could be held responsible for the injuries of Helen Palsgraf through the chain of events leading to her injuries. The duty of care portion section of this is, did the Long Island Railroad owe a duty of care to Helen Palsgraf under the circumstances? Specifically, was she within the zone of foreseeable risk when the employees helped the man board the train when he dropped the package containing fireworks? Proximate cause, even if the railroad employees acted negligently in helping the man board the train, was their negligence the proximate cause of Palsgraf's injuries? Proximate cause requires the injury to be a foreseeable result of the defendant's actions.
In the holding section of our case brief, the New York Court of Appeals held that the Long Island Railroad Company was not liable for the injuries sustained by Helen Palsgraf. The court determined that the railroad's employees did not owe a duty of care to Palsgraf because her injuries were not a foreseeable result of their actions. The court established that liability and negligence requires a direct connection between the defendant's conduct and the injury to the plaintiff, emphasizing the importance of foreseeability in establishing duty.
For the reasoning section of our case, Judge Cardozo decided the railroad company was not responsible for Miss Palsgraf's injuries because the workers didn't owe her a duty of care in the situation. According to him, the duty of care only applies to risks that are predictable and to people in a zone of danger. Since Miss Palsgraf's was far from where the package was dropped, she wasn't in this zone of danger. The court said that the workers' actions, which were helping the man with the package, were not the direct cause of Miss Palsgraf's injuries. Although their actions led to the events that caused her injury, it was too indirect and unpredictable to hold them responsible. For something to be considered a proximate cause, the harm must be a predictable result of the actions, which wasn't true in this case.
In the rules section of this case study, the rule relevant to this case is proximate cause in tort laws around liability of negligence and foreseeability. In negligence cases, a defendant can only be held liable for injuries to a plaintiff if the injuries are a foreseeable result of the defendant's conduct. Within negligent cases, there exists a duty of care when the defendant's actions create a risk of harm that is reasonably foreseeable to a person in the plaintiff's position. Liability is determined by examining whether the harm was within the scope of duty owed, emphasizing the necessity of a direct connection between the conduct and the resulting injury. In the significance and precedent section of this case study, the decision in Palsgraf versus Long Island Railroad Company had a significant impact on how courts access liability in negligence cases, particularly concerning the concept of proximate cause and foreseeability. Some specific cases that are worth mentioning that impacted the precedent was Wagon Mound, Kinsman Transit Company versus City of Buffalo, and Dillon versus Legg.